Revelation 2891. From the 22nd of September 1943. Duration of a redemption period. The time span in which a redemption period takes place depends on the resistance of the spiritual being bound in the form. A redemption period can be of short duration, as soon as particularly difficult conditions are set for the spiritual, which it must now fulfill in every form. The more difficult these conditions are, the faster the spiritual overcomes the respective form. Then the entire path of earthly life, including the last embodiment as a human being, can be covered in a very short time so that the being can reach maturity in the last stage and leave earth as a being of light. However, another earthly path can also be unsuccessful again, since the last earthly life test of free will must inevitably be passed in order to attain final freedom. But this free will can also fail as in the previous earthly life, and thus the being has to cover this path through creation again and again. Thus the development of such a being can take eternities, because every failure of free will results in renewed binding. And as soon as the being has failed several times, the conditions become increasingly more difficult, and the duration of an earth period always depends on the indomitable nature of the being and also on how often it has already gone through an ascent development out of the solid form up to the human being. The fact that the being often fails is solely its will, which does not make use of the grace which is abundantly available to it for every earthly path. Therefore the being will never be able to counter that it cannot muster the strength, but it is always up to its will whether and how it uses the strength, the grace, and the respective development period is also correspondingly long, which can bring liberation to the spiritual being when its will strives for it. Therefore the process of redemption will repeat itself again and again. Time and again the beginning of a period will be a paradisiacal state, and the end will always be a separation of the good from the bad, and a renewed banishment of the latter in the new creations of earth, which shall serve the spiritual being for its final maturing. And the time spans have to become ever shorter because every new creation has to place tougher conditions on the spiritual, which lead to ever faster deformations and thus also to a faster embodiment as a human being. For since the spiritual does not want to give up its former resistance, God applies ever harsher means to break this resistance. And such an epoch of redemption will soon come to an end in order to start anew with a new creation which will impose such aggravating conditions on the spiritual being banished within it in order to drive it to the quickest possible deformation, so that it will finally be released from it and be able to enter eternity as a spiritual being in a free state. Amen.